Welcome to the Busy Latter-day Saint, where righteous desires and living life come together. Here, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints discuss their challenges and successes in studying the Scriptures. I am your host, Richard Bernard. Before we hear from our guest, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast and to share it with your friends. Information on how to reach me and a link to my website are in the show notes. The music for this program is by Marvin Goldstein and used with his permission. And now, today's interview. Well, welcome, Jared. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Glad you could join us. And why don't we start off by you just sharing a little bit about yourself?
All right. My name's Jared Bernard. My family and I, we live in Iowa. I teach at a community college in Omaha, Nebraska. I teach information technology, so I teach things like networking and how to set up servers and some security things. I have 5 children. I'm married. And what else? And I'm your son. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yes, you are my son. You're my oldest son. And I'm here visiting with you for a few days because you had a son, Sam, that was ordained a deacon.
Yep.
And I had the pleasure of being here and seeing that. And this evening we're going to go to the temple, and it'll be the first time for him to participate in baptism. So
yeah,
I'm very happy to be here. As far as church callings, what church callings have you had?
Mostly I've been in the Elders Quorum presidencies quite a bit. I have been a bishop once. I've been on the high. I have been on the High Council for short periods of time. And that's about it, really. I've kind of cycled through those type of callings.
Okay.
You know.
And you did serve a mission.
I did.
When did you serve and where?
I served from 92 to 94, and I served in the Bristol, England mission, which no longer exists anymore. But, yeah.
Well, that's not because you were a missionary there, though.
No. They, yeah, it's been, as they reorganize things, it's been split apart and put into other missions.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, let's talk about studying the Scriptures. What is your approach in general?
Mostly my approach is just trying to find time. I mean, obviously in the morning is usually the best time for me, but I haven't been very disciplined with that. So I try to just grab small moments, like when I'm eating breakfast or before I start work. And so usually I'm in the Scriptures 2 or 3 times a day for 10 or 15 minutes at different times. I normally read from my phone because that's pretty convenient. And then if I'm planning for a lesson or something like that, I on the computer, just because it's easier to do things on the computer when you're planning for a lesson and things like that. So that's my general approach. I try to, right now I am trying to dive deep a little bit, so I'm not trying to read so many verses or anything else. I usually like I said, I'm only reading 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So usually each of those 10 or 15 minute times is focused on one verse or 2 verses. Depends how they relate to each other. And so that's kind of my approach.
So you're making a difference between reading and studying.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I feel like I've read, particularly with the Book of Mormon, I've read it several times, just growing up and everything else. So I feel like I'm fairly familiar with the storylines and the topics and what's happening. So I just want to understand more. It's not a race anymore. I'm not trying to just complete a goal of just finishing it. And just trying to understand how it relates to me right now and to my life as it currently is.
Now, you mentioned the Book of Mormon. What about the Old Testament? Have you read the Old Testament all the way through?
I have. Yep. I've
One
only done that
time?
once. It was around the time I was a teenager in seminary. So when we were studying it in seminary.
Okay. And what about the New Testament?
Yeah, I've read that probably twice. Again, first time I initially when I was in seminary, and then one other time afterwards, probably on my mission or something like that. But mostly it's the Book of Mormon I focus on. So.
Now, you mentioned you use your phone most of the time. Are there other applications or other books that you use while you're studying? Now, I would see that it would be hard because you're doing 10 or 15 minutes at a time. But are there other resources you use?
Yeah, there is. Particularly when I'm studying, like when I was studying the Isaiah chapters in 2nd Nephi, I would use the New International Version of the Bible. And what I ended up doing, too, to kind of help me understand some of those verses, is I'd just copy and paste the verse into Google and see what I get, what commentaries are. And I found this one site. I don't remember what it was because I haven't looked it up for a while. I think it was called Bible Hub or something like that. And it what it does is it recognizes that I had the King James Version, and it would break out all the other Bibles translations on this site. And then it would give commentary of people like throughout history, so you're getting like Martin Luther, and you're getting, all these old, original people who are commenting and have had sermons on that verse. And so you can really kind of break it down. And another thing it does is it breaks it down into little phrases, too, of understanding, like the Hebrew and the Greek and things like that. So you can get as granular as possible doing that. And I just discovered that, just like I said, I don't understand this, so I'm going to see what Google has to say about it. So I just copied the whole verse, put it in there, and that's how I kind of discovered that, and see what other people are saying about that verse to hopefully understand it a little bit.
Yeah, the Bible Hub, I think, is also known as the Blue Letter Bible.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the same. Now, once you were seeing a verse of Isaiah and understanding it more, is there some place that you write down what you got from it, or
yeah,
how do you do that?
I do it in the app, the Gospel Library app. So I just put the comments, and so there's a way to make notes. So usually I highlight a section of it, and then that prompts you to where you can put a comment for whatever you highlighted. And so I put either my own thoughts, if when I was studying the Isaiah verses, I would usually link it to the Bible Hub. I'd put the URL in there, or or just I would even copy the Hebrew sometimes. Like they had the Hebrew in there, so I'd copy the Hebrew in there, and then what it meant, in English, so I understood it. Because sometimes they break down it by word and by syllable and things like that, and I just paste that in the comments because I'm not going to remember it 6 months later,
right.
Until I go back and read it again and go, yeah. So I just use the little note. I don't know what it's called. Is it just called the notes?
Yeah, it's just called notes.
Notes or whatever that is in the Gospel Library.
Okay. So you use Google and you use the Bible Hub. Anything else?
No, not really. For family stuff, we do Come Follow Me now. So we're using that as a platform when we study as a family, but individually I don't use that.
Come Follow Me. How has it worked with your family?
It's worked good. We read every day in the morning, usually before the kids go to school, and then on Sunday we do a discussion about what we've read, because usually then they've had a lesson on Sunday about what we just read about that week and discussed. And then on Sunday we have either it's an activity or a thing. We take it from the primary Come Follow Me, just because we have kids, and usually they have really good suggestions that kind of highlight some of the principles or concepts that you learned in Come Follow Me, appropriate for our kids' ages. And so we read in the morning. We try not to just read, though, they're all really tired and everything else. So usually either me or my wife pose questions, and sometimes it's just to define a word or something like that. It's something as simple, the daily stuff, because we do it in the morning before school. There's kind of a time restriction there because they have to get out the door at a certain time. So I just, if it's valuable that they just have learned one thing, asked one question, had one word defined, that's a good start to the day.
I think it would be good for others to know. Obviously, I've been with you in these situations, and like this morning, was it Jacob that was all wrapped up in a blanket, or
Yep.
was it Sam? It was Jacob.
No, it was Sam.
It was Sam. Sam was wrapped up in a blanket. The point I'm making is that sometimes as families do these things, they feel that maybe it's not working well because one's not listening and one's wrapped up in a blanket and trying to go back to sleep. But we hear again and again, I remember some talks within the last year from general authorities that they had that same feeling, but their children grew up with things were sinking in, I guess is another way. And so we shouldn't be always concerned that one is antsy or maybe appearing not to pay attention, that it's the consistency that is important there.
Yeah, and we find that, it's we also have a 3-year-old, and so we try not to wake him up during it because it's a whole different experience when he's there. Like this morning, he was asleep, but sometimes he's awake when we get everybody else up too. But it's never going to be a perfect experience. At least one of them at one time, and they're hardly ever all in sync and all paying attention all at the same time. But normally one is. And, so we've had a question from Jake, who's, 8, and one time. And, obviously the older kids, Anthony is usually a little bit more on it because he's a teenager now and asks questions, And so at least, if we can connect with one, that's a success. And like I said, some days it seems like we're not connecting with anyone, but, so it's just the little things, I guess, that keep it moving forward. So,
do your children see you studying the scriptures? Since you do it, and
probably not. They see me sometimes, I guess, when I do it at breakfast, but then usually I stop because it's distracting because they're all running away. So they see it open, I guess, but once they are around, and then it's usually loud. So I don't know how often they see it. No. And Coralie, my wife, she wakes up before they wake up and studies. So I don't know if they do or not.
Well, it's something I've been thinking about lately. Now, when you were growing up, we didn't have these digital devices. We had the hard copy of the scriptures, and I bet you rarely, if ever, saw me with the scriptures open.
I don't know. I think I did a few times, like at your desk or something, but I don't know.
And I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to some talk, and someone said they always remember their mother with the scriptures open. And it had such an impact on them to see her mother always turning to the scriptures. And so I've often wondered, maybe as parents, especially in the digital age, we need to let the children know that we are studying the scriptures. And it's difficult because I get a lot more from my scripture study because of the digital devices, because I've talked about it on this broadcast before with my dyslexia and things. It makes it so much easier for me. And to recall things, it's a marvelous thing. And these devices have been put in our hand by the Lord to do His work. But I think sometimes there's a downside because scriptures used to be sitting around the house, and now they're not. Now, for example, in your situation, you have kind of a box where the scriptures or the Book of Mormons are put in. And so the scriptures aren't as evident in some houses as much as they were in the past.
Yeah, we did that intentionally. We wanted so each year now we're just going to buy kind of the cheap, the paperback copies of whatever's being studied for Come Follow Me. And so when we do the family study, we don't do it on electronic devices. We did because we only have one kid who has a phone who could do it anyways. But then too, we've also we haven't done it recently, but sometimes we go like, why don't you highlight this verse or find some, that's part of the activity or some of the engagement we've done too. So that they just highlight whatever they want with pencils and stuff like that. So anyway.
Yeah, I think it's part of the responsibility to, since we have these digital devices, is to teach them how to use them to study the scriptures.
Yeah.
And I know I enjoyed sitting with Anthony, your oldest son, on Sunday, and spending some time studying the scriptures with him. And he was able to learn some various techniques and things on how to make the most of his study time. So that's something that we as parents and even as grandparents have to work on and teach. Okay, have you had any spiritual experiences? And you don't need to necessarily indicate what those experiences are if they're special or sacred to you, but have you had spiritual experiences while reading the scriptures?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the scriptures is probably where I feel the Spirit the most. I may be a little different here. I don't think I feel it as much at the temple, to be honest, as much as I do. It's a good experience. I feel peace there, but or attending a sacrament meeting or even praying sometimes, though I have felt the Spirit in all of those situations. It just seems to be more consistent, more strong. It just seems to be more my thing of the way that's channeled to me, the Spirit, more often and more consistently is through the scriptures. So, and particularly as I dive in for it, for a time I wanted to be a seminary teacher for a while, and so I took the courses to do that and did the student teaching, and I actually taught part-time a little bit for some special needs students for seminary. And so, which is always fun because then you get to really dive into the scriptures and spend a lot of time just studying them as your job. So yeah, it's just been a powerful thing to me. That's where I tend to find most of my answers to things that I'm looking for is in the scriptures. Like I said, more so than, in prayer, I pray for things, but then I find that when I go to the scriptures, that's where I find the answers, and as I'm pondering upon things and things like that, as opposed to other good spiritual things. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just my way of best and consistently connecting with things.
When you get answers to whatever you're looking for answers for, how do they come? And I bring this up because my experience with Anthony the other day, just for the audience to know, I encouraged Anthony we had not general conference, but we had state conference this weekend. And the adult session he sat in, and he said it was, I think, one of the most boring meetings he's ever sat in. And then I encouraged him to start praying for the speakers and praying for himself that he can receive information of that something about he needs to do. Yeah. And he did do that, and I talked to him about it. And he really couldn't. He did learn some things, and he said it was less boring. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't connect with anything that maybe he needed to do. And then I asked him, has he ever received revelation? And he wasn't sure if he had or not. And so I had him read from the book of Enos, the 5th verse and the 10th verse, and where Enos talks about that he received this revelation or heard this voice, but it was actually a voice within his head. And so I just, in talking with Anthony, that sometimes it's a feeling, and sometimes it's a thought that goes through. And I don't know about anybody else, but for me, it's my whole life has been trying to see the difference between my thoughts and the thoughts that the Lord's coming in. So with all that preface, how does it come to you? Does it come as a feeling? Does it come as thoughts? Do you hear a voice? What happens?
Yeah, it's well, my feeling is that every time you feel the Spirit, that is revelation. So because it's a confirmation that what you're hearing or what you're experiencing is true. And that's revelation.
Yes.
That's the Holy Ghost speaking to you, testifying of truthfulness. That's revelation. And so that builds upon your testimony and what you know to be true, and it strengthens you. So whether you're sitting and even though you can't find something that's necessarily applicable to you or to your family or something very specific, it's just you're listening to someone bear testimony at sacrament meeting, and you feel the Spirit going, hey, what they're saying is true. Boom, that's revelation. And I guess there is something specific there. It's the saying that that's true, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
that's the message, right?
Yeah.
So, if you have that on a daily basis, whether it's through prayer or reading scriptures or attending the temple or whatever else, you're receiving revelation. So that's the way I look at it. And so many times, I guess, the most common way is just that peaceful feeling that you have of the Spirit. But as I'm reading the scriptures, and usually it comes as I'm pondering and start digging down these, the rabbit holes of what I find interesting as I'm reading, because I find then that I'm thinking about it then later, and as I'm showering, the shower seems to be a place just to think, because in a house with a bunch of kids, that's one of the only quiet places you have, to just think and just ponder things. Or sometimes when I'm driving, seems to be kind of the places that a lot of those thoughts happen, where you're just thinking over I read about that, and because you're also thinking about what you're going to go do later that day, and and then you're thinking about what you just read, and then kind of you're putting it together and how that has meaning and things like that. So so sometimes it's in thoughts, because I just get then caught up in this thought, and I feel like then that's revelation. It's putting the puzzle pieces together, to what you read, to what it means, to what you're doing, and then there's this, you get a little lost in your thoughts type of thing. That's what it is.
So it comes more line upon line.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thank you for your time, and I'm discovered that a good way to end all these is simply, if you don't mind sharing your testimony.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do know these things are true. I mean, as I've mentioned, reading the scriptures has been very powerful to me. I enjoyed doing it. I do wish I had more time to do it, which I do. I just probably need to make more time. But I know that the things I'm reading are true, because it's been reconfirmed to me time and time again, almost on a daily basis, as I feel the Spirit and as I read and do that and have experiences with my family. I know that the scriptures are true, and that what they testify is true, and in light that Joseph Smith was a prophet, because he's the one that kind of started this all in these latter days, and so I'm so thankful for him as well. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.